Good morning, everybody. This is Heike from Helsinki. I would like to welcome you to our webinar, How to Use EUSES 2.0. And I will start with a brief introduction, which will then be followed by a demo, in fact, how to use EUSES, which will be done by my colleague, Eugenia Nogueiro. I will take over then again for conclusions. We will have a Q&A session, and the webinar most likely ends around 1 o'clock. So what is EUSES? EUSES is a decision support instrument for the quantitative assessment of exposure and risk assessment of biocides, and also for other chemical substances. It is based on the EU technical guidance document, the original TGD, which was transferred at a certain time point in volume 4, part B and C for biocide, as well as the R16 for REACH. On the development status of EUSES, since 2014, JRC, the former owner of EUSES, is no longer involved in any EUSES-related legal frameworks. So therefore, developments and revisions after 2012 on biocides were not implemented. As a consequence, member states and applicants used outdated versions or prepared own solutions, which then results in a lack of consistency, transparency, and also traceability in all ways in different assessments. So the preparation of this EUSES 2.0 that we are going to present today is in fact an intermediate solution for biocides in the light of creating consistency, transparency, and traceability. What is the EUSES 2.0 project scope? What was covered in the update resulting in that version is, in fact, we had a strong focus on exposure assessment and updated mainly the release module. Implementation of the release module followed the ESDs as well as recent decisions that were taken in the Environment Working Group. What is not covered by EUSES 2.0 is the IT technology as such and the user interface, means the look and feel of the software that remained unchanged, at least still in this version. Looking a little bit deeper at the changes that were performed, on the left side you see the exposure assessment, which consists of two tools, the release module and the fate and distribution modules. In the release module, as said, new emission scenarios have been introduced. In the fate and distribution module, we included the direct release pathway as a separate pathway next to the release via SDP. And we updated also SimpleTreat. In fact, the newer version 4.0 was included in EUSES. The effect assessment as such remains unchanged. Nothing was touched there. And in the risk characterization, in line with the fate and distribution module, we included also the RCRs resulting from direct release to be in line. My colleague Eugenia will very soon introduce the module, the software to you, which will then be followed by a Q&A panel. So send us your question about the presentation. Also, if you have any technical difficulties or issues, feel free to send us a message so that we can look at them. Regarding the Q&A panel, you can submit your questions at any time. We will answer as many as possible during the live Q&A. If there are any questions not answered by the end of the webinar, you can still send them to the address that is provided on the web page, on the slide that is currently shown. After the webinar, the material will be published, in fact, on 2 sites. The recording, you can find the recording on YouTube under the given link, and the webinar will also be published on our webpage. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm handing now over to my colleague Eugenia, who will guide you through the demo.
Thank you, Heike. So hello, everybody. I'm going to present the main features of EUSES and guide you through the environmental risk assessment of a use for one product type. You will find the link to the EUSES webpage on ECHA homepage, which is right here. And you click download the EUSES software, but you need to first sign in order to download the software. So I sign in, And in case you don't have an ECA account, you need to create one. Now we need to go again and click the logo and download. You need to accept the license agreement, choose that you'd like to be notified of new versions, and download. Now you have the file, which you need to unzip in your computer before you can actually run the executable file. Okay, so now we have the folder unzipped and we can run the executable file. So this is the landing page. You click OK. When starting EUSES for the first time, you may need to create a new study. Another option would be to import a study, but I will talk about that later on. To start a new study, you need to provide a name and a description as a minimum. Then you press Start in the toolbar, or you select Start from the option Assess here. You tick the box Assessment of biocides on local scale only, and you untick the box Predators exposed via the environment, since the secondary poisoning assessment implemented in EUSES is not fit for biocides, and you also untick the box Man exposed via the environment, because it's not relevant for the assessment of biocides. I will choose to run the mode Interactive, which will guide me through the input and allows me to see the intermediate results. But other options would be to run the assessment in direct mode, if you do not wish to check the intermediate results, or in outline mode, if you want to work directly on the outline. That is, you don't want to be guided through the assessment. So from here I click Next, and I get to the defaults window. So in EUSES 220, you can select for the sewage treatment calculations between the models SimpleTreat 4 and SimpleTreat 3.1. But note that it was agreed for biocides assessment that SimpleTreat 4 should be used. So I click OK, and I will not change any other defaults here, and I click Next. Now you are prompted to enter some information regarding the substance. So the name, and description, and Next. In this menu, you need to fill in the physchem properties. So I will enter some fictitious data. You will note here that something has changed compared to EUSES, the previous version of EUSES. Here we need to enter the vapor pressure at 20 or at 25 degrees Celsius. I will enter at 20. And the tool will automatically calculate the other value, and the same is happens with the water solubility. So the tool calculates the other value. Okay, now I'm done with this. I click Next. And in this Partition Coefficients and Bioconcentration Factors window, nothing has changed. So the calculations are performed like in the previous version of EUSES. You check and you edit the values if needed, and otherwise you click Next. In the Degradation and Transformation input window, start by defining the biodegradability in the tab Characterization. I will choose Readily Biodegradable, failing the 10 days window. And in the tab STP, you'll note that this has been changed according to the settings of SimpleTreat 4. So now you can choose between 3 methods for the biodegradation test method. If you select method 1, the default value of for the degradation constant at 15 degrees Celsius is based on the previous selected biodegradability. If you select method 2, you need to enter manually the value for the first order degradation constant for aqueous phase and sludge at 15 degrees Celsius. And if you select method 3, you need to enter the first order degradation constant value for aqueous phase at 15 degrees Celsius. But I will select method 1. So, and I will not change anything in the next tabs, and I will click Next. The next window, the removal rate constants window, provides an overview of the estimated dissipation rates in soil, and nothing has changed here compared to the previous version of EUSES. So we click Next, and we get now to the release module. EUSES 220 contains new and updated release scenarios for most of the product types. For instance, for PT2, there are new scenarios covering industrial areas, air conditioning systems, chemical toilets, swimming pools, aquaria, indoor fountains, and wall treatment against algae. In other product types, there are only a few new scenarios. For instance, for PT5, we have hospital drinking water, and for PT8, we have a new scenario, which is the railway sleepers. An important feature of EUSES 220 is the inclusion of the default scenarios, which are being developed by ECHA, by grouping certain scenarios and which can be applied when no other emission scenario exists for a specific use. So we have now 2 of those scenarios. One covers indoor application to surface or volume, and the second one covers the outdoor application to surface. One thing I forgot to mention is that we have implemented the recently published emission scenario documents for PT6 and PT14. So these 2 product types are based in the new ESDs. Finally, worth mentioning is the fact that scenarios for PT21 are no longer available in EUSES, since these are covered by external tools like, for example, MEMPAC. Also, the use of insecticides in stables and manure, this one was also removed from EUSES because was no longer up to date, and Excel files will be made available in the ECHA ESD webpage. And also this had consequences for the implementation of the related uses in PT3, so these will also be covered by Excel files. Now let's take a closer look to one of the existing scenarios, which was extensively revised, which is PT8. And I will use it to perform an assessment and to point out some new other features of EUSES 220. I will use the specific scenario, which is treated wood in service UC3. Let's fill in first here the usage. And click Next. So this scenario, treated wood in service UC3, covers all the PT8 scenarios for use class 3. The input tab contains all the input values and some intermediate results, which is the case of this tab, while the output contains the final output of the release module, so the local emission values which are used for the subsequent calculations. In the input tab, the parameters are enabled or disabled according to options that I will choose for certain parameters. So for instance, I will select the noise barrier scenario, and some parameters are filled in with default values. Then, looking at the different tabs, the in situ treatment tab is disabled because this is not relevant for this scenario. Then in the service life tab, I will need to select the application method, which will then determine the value of the service life. So I will choose automated spraying, and automatically number of fields are filled in. Note that we have 3 assessment periods now: initial assessment period, intermediate assessment period, and service life. The intermediate assessment period is not used currently for decision making. However, when performing an assessment, you should always check the latest version of the technical agreements for biocides for any updates on this. So in the service life, I will then provide leaching data, and I will again give some fictitious data here. You click the next tab to see the cumulative quantities which are calculated for these input parameters. In the output tab, you will see the local emissions to soil and the local emissions to wastewater due to leaching. These releases are again shown in the local emissions window. Note here a major update in EUSES 220, which are the direct releases, are now separately shown in the table. Now click Edit, and you'll see the releases to wastewater are displayed in the tab Release via STP, and the releases to soil are displayed in the tab Direct Releases. Click OK and Next to get to the distribution module. The window local STP and configuration was modified according to the settings of SimpleTreat 4. Check that the default values apply. I will keep the default chemical class, but I could also choose acid or base. And in the STP configuration tab, note that the industrial STP has been added. But for biocides, we use municipal STP. So I don't change anything else here. In the next window, Local STP, the tab Distribution provides information on the emission fractions of the substance leaving the STP to the different subsequent environmental compartments, as well as the fraction of substance degraded in the STP. The PEG for microorganisms in the STP is now shown in the Concentrations tab. In the next window, Local Concentrations and Depositions, the tab Release via STP reports the local concentration in air, in surface water, and in sediment, and in soil and in groundwater, which is following the deposition from the air. In the Direct Releases tab, the tab Soil provides the local concentrations at the different assessment periods. And these concentrations here do not take into account degradation. And note that different soil compartments are considered for the direct releases and for the releases via STP. So we cannot combine these two concentrations. The local pegs for the different compartments are provided in detail in this window. Note that for direct releases, the pegs with and without removal are provided here. You click Next and you'll see that the improved results table, which shows all the values which will be used in the subsequent calculations. So we click Next, and we are now in the Effects section of EUSES. In this section, in the following windows related with effects, no changes have been introduced compared to the previous version of EUSES. But I will need to introduce here some effects data so that I can conclude the assessment. So again, I will enter here some fictitious data. The environmental PNACs window provides an overview of the resulting PNAC values, which will be used for the risk assessment. We have now arrived to the risk characterization section of EUSES. The environmental risk characterization window provides the risk characterization ratios for the different compartments. And as before, we have here a new window, direct releases, which shows the risk characterization ratios for the direct releases. If you click Next, you'll see again the improved results table, which gives an overview of all the risk characterization ratios, including direct releases. And you can see already that there are risks which are not controlled, which are indicated in red. So I will need to refine the assessment. But for now, I will save it in the database and we'll resume the work later. So I click Next, the assessment is finished, and I can now save it. I go to File, Save As, and choose Study, and it will be saved with the name and description which I provided in the beginning. So the file is now in the database, and I can export the file from here, or I can print it as a Word file or as an Excel, and with different options: full report, compact, or summary. Regarding the import of files, as I mentioned in the beginning of this demo, when you run EUSES for the first time, you can either start a new study or import one. You can import a study file created in EUSES 2.2.0 as just shown, but we recommend that you do not import files from the older EUSES version, because due to the changes in the fate and distribution modules, in case you import a study file created in EUSES 2.1.2, not all the information in the file will be imported into the new version of EUSES. You can read more about the new features of EUSES 2.2.0 in the practical guide how to use EUSES 2.2.0, which is here in a EUSES webpage. Note that the practical guide is not meant to be a software manual. It is a guide that describes the changes and new features in the EUSES version 2.2.0 compared to the previous version, and it explains the reasoning behind certain implementation options in the existing limited EUSES software settings. And this practical guide also provides an overview table of the relevant guidance explaining the scientific background for the implementation in EUSES. And with this, I conclude this brief demo on the new features on EUSES 220.
So thanks a lot, Eugenia, for the introduction of EUSES 220. We continue now with the Q&A panel session, and I have sitting next to me Adriana Lipkova from the Biocides Unit Environmental Team, being the moderator of the session, and to my left, Eugenia Nugairo, also working for Biocides, the environmental team. And I hand over now to Adriana to introduce the questions.
Thank you. We have received quite some questions, so that just shows how much interest there is outside in the tool. And the first question is asking, is SimpleTreat 4 used with the adaptation as discussed in the tab?
And I can take this question up. In fact, yes, it is. We have implemented SimpleTreat 4.0 in the way as it is provided in the standalone tool, however, taking into account all the specific adjustments that have been made for biocides. And these are the adjustments which are summarized, provided in the technical agreements for biocides, the tab version 2.0. It's environmental entry number 9, and there it is specifically detailed which parameters have been adjusted biocides specifically.
Thank you. The next question is about degradation and DT50 values. It asks if you have specific DT50 values in different compartments, such as water, soils, STP, where to insert these values?
I can answer that one. I can also share my desktop, actually the EUSES, and show where to insert the DT50 values. So in the degradation and transformation input window, after we have the values are already calculated based on previous input that we entered in the tool, and that's where any measured value can be entered. So you can overwrite any of these outputs if you have measured data, and then automatically, for instance, a total will be calculated based on individual rate constants entered in the other fields.
Good, thank you. The next question is a bit more generic. The person is asking, will this EUSES update be integrated in KSR software?
I think I can take that question up. In fact, not really. We will come back to that a little bit later. I will say some words on the future of EUSES. So far, it's not foreseen that this EUSES update is integrated into KSR. But the next step would be that KSR and EUSES will be merged into one new tool. And as said, I will provide some further information on that towards the end of the Q&A panel.
Good. We are moving now to the STP module. For what reason has the differentiation between municipal STP and industrial STP been introduced?
I think I can also take that question up. In fact, what we wanted to integrate in EUSES is in fact the full functionality of SimpleTreat 4.0 of the alone standing module. Also having in mind that some users will use EUSES maybe not specifically for biocides assessment, but potentially also for doing any assessments if they would have any issues with releases from, for example, an industrial plant. Maybe also, if you would like to do, you still can use EUSES 2.2.0 for any kind of REACH assessment. If you would like to cross-check what would be the outcome, the theoretical outcome when using an industrial STP under REACH. However, what I have to say and what I really would like to outline, that for biocides, for the time being, it is not foreseen that you can do any assessment with an industrial STP. When you do a standard biocide assessment, you always should use the municipal STP.
Great. Then the next question is still about the SimpleTreat. Are all the updated parameters in the new version of SimpleTreat implemented in EUSES acceptable for biocides environmental risk assessment? And in the brackets, it's given, for instance, the new value for concentration of suspended solids in the effluent.
I think I can immediately take that up as
please.
well. In fact, for biocides, specific agreements have been taken. What should be used, which are the default parameters that should be used for SimpleTreat and 4.0. And in EUSES, the biocide defaults have been implemented as a first choice. And you can see them, as mentioned already on a question before. When you go to tab version 2.0, check environmental entry number 9, there you can see exactly how, in fact, SimpleTreat 4.0 should be used for biocides. And there is a certain pre-selection of those items, of those default values in EUSES 2.2.0 in the SimpleTreat module.
Thank you. Then another question is actually related to the scenarios already, the biocide scenarios. And the person is asking, if I'm correct, PT18 and thus PT3 scenarios have been removed. When will the Excel become available then? Should we stay with previous EUSES version for now for these uses?
I can take that. Yes, so for this PT18 and PT3, we have removed, that's right. We plan to publish updated Excel files by the end of the year, and please don't use the current, the old EUSES, because this is not correct. So use the emission scenario document instead, and before we have the Excel available.
That's it. Thank you. Let's have a look at the questions. There are quite plenty coming in. The next question is, how is the direct release scenario connected to the tonnage-based exposure module? In brackets, widespread and background pack, are they run in parallel and do they interact in terms of pack local calculations?
I can take that question. In fact, the direct release module so far is only implemented for cases where we have a consumption and tonnage, and consumption-based approach. For tonnage-based approaches, in fact, this direct release is not implemented because that would go in direction of the REACH scenarios or the scenarios that are provided in the A and B table. And there, in fact, we have not implemented it. This will be an action of the major EUSES update. In fact, this merge of KSAR and EUSES into a new tool. We will say some words to that later, means so far direct release is only applicable for biocide scenario where you have, for example, leaching during treatment or, let's say losses during the application directly to soil or surface water. And you can read also on that in the how to use EUSES. We have some tonnage-based approaches implemented for some in the product types, and I refer to how to use EUSES specifically for those product types. We provided explanations in that document on why and how direct release can or cannot be applied.
Then the next question is a bit technical, I guess. The person is asking, it was mentioned not to import EUSES files created in the older version. How should we handle this if we need to use earlier data?
Well, I can try to answer. I think, unfortunately, you can upload the file. Is that most of the information will not be transferred. Namely, the scenarios have been changed considerably, so only by chance some values will be imported. So the substance properties will be imported, but maybe that's not the most important information, or that takes more time to introduce. Unfortunately, what I could suggest is to really type in the new information, the information in the new EUSES. Of course, you can import and then type in the information which was not imported to minimize the work.
Thank you. Then another question, I'm not sure that we have answered it already, maybe yes. The person is asking for chemicals environmental assessments We usually use KSR. Will the updates in EUSES 2.2.0, such as SimpleTreat model, also be updated in KSR for use in chemical assessments?
I can take that one up. I think it's similar to the answer we have already provided. At this point in time, EUSES 2.2.0 was mainly updated because there was simply no exposure assessment tool for biocides available. An updated one, there was the old EUSES version, but that was from 2012, so really outdated. And what we did, the changes we did, mainly focus on biocides. For REACH, we highly recommend continue using KSR. And I think under REACH, it is also not yet discussed if SimpleTreat 3.1 or 4.0 should be used. So again, what we did in EUSES was under the biocides legislation. And on the use of EUSES under REACH and the changes of KSR, again, we refer to the major update or the major development of the new tool that will start next year, where in fact REACH and biocides will be harmonized into one tool as far as possible.
Then the next question, if no emission scenario is available, is it still possible to fill E local value directly without any more adjustment of the default parameters? I can repeat one more time.
No, I can. I think I can take that up. Yes, of course, it's possible. You can, in fact, override the release module by simply including e-local water directly at the local emission window. And just in case, please also note, in case you don't have an emission scenario, what was included in EUSES 2.2.0 at the end. When you look at the list of scenarios implemented, we have implemented 2 default scenarios, which provides a wide possibility to include input parameters. Those ones give a certain flexibility, so means you could start with those ones in case there is no emission scenario included. If not, as before, do your calculations outside of EUSES and simply manually include the e-local water, e-local soil, e-local air, whatever you have calculated outside EUSES in the tool.
Thank you. Next question is more generic. It deals with future updates, our plans on future updates. Are the settings in the new EUSES going to be updated to keep up with the changes to ESDs and TAP? Where can a user find out which version of ESD and TAP are included?
That's a very good question, which I'm happy to take up. In fact, what was done now reflects more or less the status that we had at the beginning of mid-2019. So we really tried before the release. We really tried before the release everything that was still concluded at the beginning of this year to include it into EUSES 2.2.0 to have the most updated status possible. But everybody who, let's say, works in the biocide world knows that changes happening at almost each working group meeting. And what will happen, EUSES 2.2.0 will not be further updated, but I'm referring again to this major update that happens starting next year. So there we will implement a possibility. There, of course, everything that is new since now will be added. And starting from then, let's say we will have the possibility. We have more flexibility in updating the tool. The issue of the old EUSES is that the coding is quite, let's say, ancient. And then it's not very easy, let's say, to fix default values. So, or fix scenarios means that will be something that will happen more in the future in the major update, that EUSES will be corrected much more frequently. So means everything that has changed towards the end of this year is not yet reflected in EUSES 2.2.0. But when it concerns default values, you can always override default values. Means if a new default value was agreed, simply override the existing one in EUSES. And if it's a new emission scenario, you have to do your calculations outside and then include the outcome in the local emission window.
Thank you. That was quite extensive. Then quite a specific question. How dry cleaning in PT18 is calculated in comparison to wet cleaning, but then the person follows up with a generic question. Is there the possibility to show the calculation equation beneath the EUSES?
Yes, I can answer that. Well, well, if I understood correctly, the equations are not shown in EUSES, but we do have Excel files where they are still in the ECA webpage of where the ESD documents are provided, and maybe there that could help to understand which equations have been implemented in EUSES. But the tool EUSES calculates the emissions when there is dry cleaning. Actually, there is no emission to the wastewater, and when there is wet cleaning, the emissions from the wet cleaning are added to calculate the total emission. So I don't know if you want to add something.
Maybe short notice to add on that note that in EUSES we didn't invented any new equation. Means what was implemented in EUSES is in fact what was available in the ESD, in the respective ESD, plus considering the newest tab entry. So what we have is in fact ESD plus anything that was corrected or added in whatever tab entry.
Thank you. Then another question is actually a bit technical again. When printing reports, the information in all EUSES windows is deleted. I would have to close the program and open it again to have it visible again. Is this bug known?
Well, no. If that's a bug, no, it's not known.
In fact, we tried, let's say during the testing, we tried to print full reports, compact reports, and we haven't seen any issues, but maybe we can follow that up. We can yes. Make a cross-check after this webinar. But we haven't seen, again, since we tested it, we haven't seen this problem in the testing.
Where should these bugs be reported? In general, I mean, if they are spotted by the users?
I think there is an
help desk.
Yeah. Yes. All right.
Yes.
One person is still asking about the relationship to KSAR in the future. Did I get it right that KSAR will merge into a new tool for application under both REACH and BPR?
Yes. Yes.
I guess the person is asking if EUSES will merge into the and KSAR together into new tool, whatever the name will be.
Yes, exactly. I always talk about the major update because we haven't yet found a name. But yes, KSAR and EUSES will be merged in one new tool, name to be defined. If you have a brilliant idea, please feel free to send it to us. We are happy for suggestions. And what will happen, in fact, the software outline will rather be in the direction of KSAR, because KSAR is a quite new module, quite new tool, but all the functionalities in EUSES will then be merged to that new tool. Means the new tool most likely will look a little bit like KSAR, but it provides the functionality to do assessments for biocides and assessments for REACH. We know that the release estimations for both legal areas are quite different. So there is no aim to, let's say, do the assessment for biocides using the REACH, ERGS, and SPERGS, or using the ESDs for REACH. However, if there are possibilities, for example, if there is direct release for a formulant or whatever substance that is applied in a similar way as biocides are applied, of course, then also under REACH you could use that assessment for biocides. Vice versa, if you do a tonnage approach under biocides, there would be the possibility to use then the REACH settings. Still, there are issues that needs to be discussed in the background, legal issues, for example, using then ERGS for biocides, which will be discussed at a later stage in the respective bodies.
One more question on the future. Will products assessment reports, PARS, be possible to generate by Euclid and the new tool replacing KSAR, as it is the case for CSRs under REACH?
Yes, I can take that up as well. In fact, that is the aim. The functionality that you currently have under KSAR, that you can generate via pushing a button, a CSR. That functionality is also looked for biocides. Means at a certain time point you can prepare maybe not the full PAR and CAR, but at least the exposure and risk assessment section. You can prepare via pushing a certain button in the new tool, and you could then more or less include that in your PAR or CAR.
That's a bright future ahead of us, I guess.
I hope so.
That's good to hear. Then back to SimpleTreat. Can I use SimpleTreat 3.1 for biocides assessments?
In fact, referring back again to that respective tab entry that was mentioned already a couple of times, for biocides it was agreed, and when I remember correctly, it was somewhere in 2007 that in fact a SimpleTreat 4.0 should be used as module for the assessment of a sewage treatment plant. Means for biocide it is recommended now definitely to use SimpleTreat 4.0. If there are time-wise issue, for example, it is related to product authorization or referral, which was prepared 3 or 4 years ago, and at that time SimpleTreat 3.1 was used, and something needs to be corrected and cross-checked there. Under that specific circumstances, you could still use SimpleTreat 3.1. But if you do a new assessment right now, we highly recommend, because it's now the agreed state of the art, to use SimpleTreat 4.0.
Thank you. The next question is going a bit to the detail, but let's try if we can answer. I guess it's for Eugenia. Do you know if the PT3 scenarios have been provided with all the types of animal housing mentioned in the ESD document?
Well, in EUSES, we implemented only 2 scenarios for PT3, and they are not. I can check which ones we implemented. So we implemented the disinfection of vehicles used for animal transport, and we implemented the disinfection in hatcheries. So the other ones we didn't implement yet, and these are the ones which will be covered by the Excel files, which I mentioned a while ago. So yes, in that case, they will cover the animals as in the ESD.
Okay. The next question is a bit technical. I think we will need some illustration with EUSES. In previous versions of EUSES, it was possible to assign colors to the parameter's status. Is this feature still available?
Yes, so yes, indeed, I can show here with my, sorry, I'm going to share the screen now. Again, yes, so the feature still exists. So you would go, I will end up this assessment. You'll go to System, Options, and then here under Parameter Status Colors, usually we choose to highlight the parameters which we set, so that we can quickly see which ones were modified. So this is still, we didn't touch this feature.
Thank you. The next question is still a bit technical. In the older versions of EUSES, there was a help function available in every window. By clicking on the help button, it was possible to see the equations used for the calculations and reference to guidance. It seems that this was not implemented. Are there any plans to implement this in the future?
Yes, thank you. No. So we will not update this version of EUSES, as it was mentioned. And we could not implement such a functionality. In fact, only the very old versions of EUSES had it. The latest one, 2.1.2, did not have it anymore due to some incompatibilities, technical issues with Microsoft. So we would not have the possibility to prepare such a help function. So we just redirect the user to the guidance documents which we have used. So the emission scenario documents, the PPR guidance, and the tab.
Thank you. Back to, let's say, more scientific questions. In the physical chemical properties window, it is not possible anymore to enter the experimental temperature at which the vapor pressure and water solubility were determined. Why is that?
I can take that question up. In fact, that was changed following discussion with our FISCAM experts, where we had quite intensive discussions. The issue is depending on at what temperature do you measure your vapor pressure or water solubility. And for certain substances, in fact, you would derive a curve, and you, based on that measurement curve, you have to derivate your vapor pressure and water solubility at 20 or 25 degrees. And this is in fact also how it is written in the respective OECD guidance document, and also for biocides in volume, I think it's volume 2, part A, where in fact it is described how the values have to be reported. Means for biocides, you report in your car the vapor pressure and the water solubility at those test temperatures. Therefore, since when you use Arrhenius, you may come to certain mistakes depending on how your curve for the vapor pressure looks like. Therefore, we decided that this should be done outside, substance specific, and then restrict the inclusion of the temperatures at 20, at 25 degrees.
Thank you. Then there is a question directly related to the presentation which was made. The person is asking, in the scenario you show, the nose barrier, there is a parameter named number of emission days under the header parameters required for the distribution module or for calculation of PECs. Can you explain what does this mean? This parameter is not needed for the release module.
Yes. So this parameter number of emission days is present in all the scenarios, and because it's needed for a Phaeton distribution module and sometimes for the release module, not the case for this scenario I showed. So we have implemented in this way. That's why now it's consistently present in all the emission scenarios, even when it's not needed for the release module itself.
All right. Then still a question on the SimpleTreat one more time. I come to different results for the STP output when using SimpleTreat 4 compared to the version implemented in EUSES. I guess there is question why.
I can take that up. It depends on, let's say, if your differences are slight or major. If your differences are major, of course, we recommend check if the input parameters were set correctly. If they are slight differences, this is due to the fact that the temperature conversion from Kelvin to Celsius was implemented in EUSES more accurately. Let's say there is a point 1.5, one value of dot 1.5 compared to the value that is used in SimpleTreat. So automatically, when you have slight results, this is due to the fact that this temperature conversion, Kelvin, Celsius, is more precise in EUSES. In fact, that is the value that was implemented in EUSES from the beginning.
Thank you. The next question, it goes back to scenarios one more time. I guess it's for Eugenia. It refers to PT18 and specifically indoor spray application under 18.2.1. It says, it is not easy to understand the section in which it has been inserted the quantity of commercial product applied per square meter. In the case of PT18 products, it occurs often that the product is sold in a concentrated formulation that have to be diluted before its use. It is therefore not so clear if in this section it has to be put the amount of concentrated product or the amount of the product after its dilution. Can you clarify?
Yes, I had seen that question, and I had opened already here the scenario, PT18, which is mentioned. So what is actually needed is to enter the quantity of the commercial product applied, as it's written here in the input parameter name. So it's not the diluted product, it's the commercial product.
All right.
Yes.
That's the answer. Good. Then let's move to the next question. It talks about general input, select formulation use versus select treatment. If one selects formulation use, it would also be good if the available treatments relevant For that formulation, use were displayed. At present, all possibilities are reflected. So one could select spray, crack, and crevice in formulation use and combine it with, for instance, with barrier surface, which makes no sense. This is confusing. Please adapt.
I can take that up. In fact, yeah, I think it's a very good suggestion. However, not yet implemented in that way in EUSES 2.2.0. But we will take that definitely up in the future major update.
Good. Then we continue on the specific questions regarding scenarios. Again, a reference is made to the PT 10.3 service life house in the countryside. An assessment if no leaching data is available is not implemented and should be added.
Yeah, I can take that up. In fact, when no leaching data is there, they are default values that have been agreed by the working group. In fact, it is 100% leaching during time 1, 75% leaching for the new time 2, which, however, is currently not yet used for decision making, and then 50% for time 3. And in fact, you can then use those values, take your application rate, and then calculate the corresponding leaching from that.
There is a follow-up question to the question that we just had just before. In relation to the commercial product, it was not clear what panel is intended with commercial product regarding the question on PT18. Can you clarify?
What? Sorry, what?
One more time. It was not clear what panelist intended with commercial product regarding the question on PT18. Can you clarify?
Well, it's the product that is sold by the manufacturer, which is then bought by the professional and diluted previous to the use.
Yeah, I think
so that's
that
the
covers,
commercial
yes.
product.
Yeah.
Yes. Then let's move to the next question. It is again specific to a scenario 10.2 in situ treatment with a roller or brush. Fraction of product lost during application due to dripping. A pick list would help to distinguish use by professionals and amateurs. Currently, the value for professionals is implemented. Eugenia,
Yes,
I guess.
so I had seen that. Yes, it's implemented in the industrial use scenario, but for 10.2 we have industrial use scenario and a private use scenario. So for private use or for this for that fraction for private users, you should choose the life cycle stage private use, and the industrial use life cycle stage for professional users, and the respective fraction is implemented in the respective life cycle stage.
While we are still having the screens open for scenarios, I think I would take the next question on the scenarios, which is also in relation to is related to PT2 and specifically scenarios 2.62 swimming pools above ground. And it says, according to TAP, there are 3 emission pathways into the environment. The direct release to soil is implemented. The direct release to surface water is missing and should be implemented.
Oh, yes, that's correct. But we did not have time to implement that emission, that release path. So we will, we will include in the major update.
I still have to go back on the previous concentrated, commercial product, because somebody is still not completely clear on that. So we probably need to clarify from our side. So the person asked it one more time. So is it the concentrated form?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
The one that is sold by the manufacturer.
Yes. Then it's still there is a question on the Fiskan properties. Does Henry's law constant still need to be set by the user? It could be calculated by the vapor pressure.
I can take that. In fact, both is possible. There is a function in EUSES to calculate it. But if you have a measured Henry's law constant, then of course you can also override this value by a measured Henry's law constant.
Good. If we are done, then back to the scenarios. Is there any project to introduce the PT3 disinfection of animal housing scenarios? And in brackets, it says Excel sheets has not been provided on ECHA website. So we are repeating a little bit
Yes.
what we have said
So
already, I
there
think.
seems to be a need for publishing these
I'm afraid
Excel files soon. So there is no project to include them in EUSES. As we said, there will be no update of EUSES until the major update. So we will publish the Excel files as soon as possible.
Thank you. It looks like that we have pretty much reached the all the answers we have given already. So I guess let me ask then the last final question before we close the session. And that question simply is, what do you see as the benefits of using EUSES for the users, for the competent authorities, for us?
I can take that up. In fact, the main aim to create this EUSES was, in fact, to create a basis for a harmonized assessment for biocides, in fact, improve the consistency. So we are aware that member states as well as applicants started to prepare own Excel sheets, and which of course was very helpful. At the time there was no common tool, but the idea is really to have one tool in which you can prepare your exposure assessment. You can easily share the export file and attach also the report to the car, which is then assessed with everybody also with the same tool. So mainly improve the time you need for your exposure assessment, improve consistency, harmonize, and overall the main aim speeding up then of course also the whole process.
That sounds like we are at the end of the Q&A session, and I guess that now we should try to conclude.
I will say some concluding words. Thank you very much for your very active participation. Many of the questions went in the same directions, from which we then get some lessons learned. So one lessons learned definitely is that we have to provide the ESD, the Excel sheets for the ESD for PT3, the missing scenario, as well as PT18, means those pathway which release substances via manure to agricultural soil or grassland. So that seems to be, there seems to be a certain need. I will also say some words on the future of EUSES later on. First, some messages to you. We kindly invite you start using EUSES from today. So we invite industry to use it for preparing your dossiers, member states for preparing your CARs and PARs. We also invite you to attach then the EUSES report and Excel files to your dossier for the competent authority report in the product assessment report. On the future, oops, I was too fast. So on the future, as mentioned several times, there will be no future update of EUSES as a standalone tool. The next step, in fact, is then merge EUSES and CASA into one new tool. Some of you may have attended the workshop in June 2018 in Brussels, where in fact all the update needs have been discussed. So there was a wide range of issues which have been prioritized, for example, including or updating the MEN via the environment, including direct release for REACH, having a scenario for direct release on agricultural soil. So all those items will be taken up in this major update together with all those new development that came up in the frame of biocides after EUSES 2.2.0 was released. And the development is planned to start beginning of next year, and we estimate the whole development will take at least 2 years. So let's see if we have something ready by end of 2021, beginning of 2022. As said before, the tool will cover both legislations to increase harmonizations, because in fact
the effect assessment as well as the fate and distribution in the environment for both legislation should be rather similar, having in mind that biocides and REACH exposure and risk assessment started in 2003 with the TGD, means with the same document, and then they deviated a little bit in REACH. There were changes introduced in R16. For biocides, there were changes introduced in volume 4, part B plus C. So the aim is the major part, in fact, the fate and distribution, effect assessment, risk assessment, to harmonize between biocides and REACH, being aware that the emission estimation, the release estimation is done differently between the two legislation. So there we will try to give the possibility to use as much as possibilities the features that are available for biocides and REACH to both areas. But still, it will be possible when you enter the tool that you can do an assessment for REACH or an assessment for biocides. Having then for biocides all the benefits that are currently already there for REACH, for example, preparing your assessment report via a click of a button. Then we go to the next slide. As mentioned at the beginning, this webinar will be published, so you find the recording on YouTube under the file that is provided now on the screen. And you find also all materials from previous webinars. You find it on the ECHA webpage under the link that is provided there. We will look after the webinar at all the questions that were asked. So if your question was not answered, we highly recommend send it again for us for recording purpose via the help desk, and we will pick it up from there and will answer it then. And please note also that you will receive a feedback form after the webinar closes, and we kindly ask you to take the time to share your thoughts with us and propose maybe also topics that you find interesting for further webinars. With that, I would like to thank you again for your participation, and my two panelists for trying or giving answers to your questions. Yeah, thanks a lot. And with that, we would like to say goodbye from Helsinki.